Hello and welcome back to Processing the Process, where we capture and discuss the technical, psychological, and contextual dynamics that shape the process of creating a work of art. Week by week, moment by moment, we are following Jonathan Riddell, choreographer and artistic director of Riddell Dance Theater, as he creates his latest works for RDT's Second Story Dance project and ventures into new creative territory.
Ooh.
Today, we are going to focus on Jonathan's first two rehearsals with the Albany Berkshire Ballet that took place on July 1st and July 8th. Now, first, John, I thought I would bring up the fact that you are really dealing with quite a number of contextual challenges with this ABB project. And I wrote down three in particular that I thought I'd bring up today. The first is that John has a 2.5-hour drive to Albany and a 2.5-hour drive back from Albany with a 5-year-old and 3-year-old in the car.
My halo is showing.
Oh yes, and growing brighter by the moment. Because we all know that concept of road trip gets old pretty quickly when you're that age. And anyone who has kids knows how challenging it is to be in the car for that length of time. However, we're lucky because Edgar and Eliza are very much and always looking forward to playing with Jonathan's colleague Lisa's son, Ben. So that's a nice carrot held out, and they very much enjoy being in the home of Lisa's mother. So maybe this is a good time for a nice shout out, John.
Yes, thank you to the Yanacito clan for helping to take care of my children and of course your beautiful son and grandson Ben. And they play together very, very well. They get to hang out and enjoy each other while Lisa and I fly away to rehearsal.
And Lisa's mom, from what you tell me, John, has been a huge supporter of RDT
since
from
the beginning.
Yeah. So we thank you. Now, the second challenge is quite difficult, as I understand it. And that is that you have only three rehearsals to create a 7.5-minute duet for Verdant Fire and rehearse the Verdant Fire quartet, as both sections are slated to be on the August 16th program. Jonathan, how are you going to pull this off?
I have a plan. There's a plan in place, and if we all just stick to the plan, it should be fine. Well, and to clarify, there will be more rehearsals for the dancers to rehearse the piece, but I have only been able to schedule my time in such a way that I can get up there because of the commute you mentioned and everything.
Right.
Three times on 3 days. So in that time, we're really trying to maximize my ability to work and the time that the time really be spent on the choreography of the new section and any coaching that I would need to do on the quartet. So the dancers are as best they can, trying to come in prepared with the quartet material that they already know. There's some new people going in, so they're trying to watch the video and know the material so that there's not a lot of time wasted on me starting from scratch on that. In terms of the duet, as we discussed in our last video cast, I have a whole plan, a whole template laid out. There's a scenario written. There's kind of a map of the music that I've created. So I know right where I'm going, and that allows me to be spontaneous and sort of whimsical with the actual movement creation in the studio, so we can come up with hopefully some fresh ideas. But I always know that we will remain on target with getting the story told, getting the music to use the music in a way that is beautiful and interesting and makes sense from start to finish, without sort of getting derailed because we're rushing.
So having that plan really is critical under these kinds of circumstances.
Yes, yeah. If I had weeks and weeks of rehearsal to really play and experiment and try out ideas, that's always lovely, and we always want that, but you don't always get that, and sometimes it's just plain darn good to come in prepared and have thought through a lot of the things you kind of want to toss around. Think through them first and see maybe some aren't worth trying. And you can figure that out on your own.
Well, the third element that occurred to me is the fact that you've known and worked with Lisa McBride for many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, Lisa has been the Associate Artistic Director of RDT for a long time. So, Jon, you really know Lisa's style. You're familiar with her technical and artistic strengths, and you know how the two of you work together. But you're also now working with a couple of ABB dancers with whom you are not familiar.
Right.
So, can you describe the differences in your approach when you work with a colleague with whom you are familiar versus working with one or more with whom you are not?
Well, it's very personal. It's very much building a relationship with new people. It's sort of the same with your friends. Like, you have your friends who you've known for forever, and you can speak in shorthand and finish each other's sentences, and even before you see them, you can anticipate sort of how they'll receive you. If we're talking about choreography, you can already sort of picture, oh, that'll look really good on that person, or that person will do that very well. With new people, it's hopefully there's a lot of mutual respect that you're bringing to the table, and that they are bringing to the table, and hopefully everyone remains curious and open to each other. So I try and maintain that. I don't want to shut anybody down, especially, not too early, at least. So, I think there's a little bit more of, maybe there's some politeness at the beginning. Maybe there's certainly a learning curve with each other and how each other works. But you try and stay true to yourself and be clear, and understand that they are, they're trying to stay neck and neck with you. They're doing their best, and I can't really ask for anything more. The dancers are doing very well, and that's nice. And I think that's professionalism. I think that's human courtesy.
Absolutely. And yet, I imagine for any choreographer working with, let's call it, a mixed group of dancers, those who you know and those who you don't, it could be a tricky balancing act in some ways. So it does, I would imagine, require perhaps even more consciousness on your part of the ways that you work with each of the different individuals and how you meld that together, I imagine.
Yeah, well, and also in this case, I do have Lisa as a compatriot and as an example. Like, so the other dancers can kind of, they look at me and how I'm executing the movement or what I'm saying, but then they can also look at her and Sometimes she has direct input as someone who dances the work and as someone who, when I'm not there, directs the work. So they quite literally look to her for direction, but they also can just turn to the side and see her executing the movement and say, oh, I bet I'm supposed to be doing it like that. And chances are yes. Yeah, I mean, so, which is then a different dynamic, obviously, than if all the dancers I've worked with before, sure, then I've got a room full of people who know me, and that's wonderful. But then there's the other side of having nobody that I've worked with before, and I've certainly been in all of those circumstances.
Exactly. So that's a nice summary of the circumstances that Jonathan comes into rehearsal with for our first rehearsal, July 1st. Now, in the very beginning, Anna was reviewing a video of the Section 3 quartet to familiarize herself with it, while Jonathan worked with Ruslan and Lisa on the construction of the duet. Now, Jon, you confided in me that you came into this part of the rehearsal feeling rather nervous, and I found that to be incredibly interesting because I know that, and you referred to this earlier in this video cast, that you did extensive prep work, analyzing the musical landscape, identifying key plot points, coordinating the music and the choreography, and even started fleshing out a variety of narrative and choreographic choices. So you'd done all of this, and I know you said eventually you realized you had to trust your preparation, you had to trust your process. So why do you think that initially you had a hard time doing that?
Well, I'm not sure if it's so much that I didn't trust the prep work I had done, or well, I'll just say what I'm thinking, and maybe we'll see if trust is the right word. There's always that little doubt of maybe it won't work. I've done all this prep, but until you apply it to the bodies, to the people, until you're in the room doing it, there's still that question mark. So yes, so to a certain degree, that's trust. But I think it's that leap, like you prepare as much as you can, but then there's always that leap of now applying it, and will it work? So so there's that. There's also then again the personal relationship. I'm working with some new dancers. I understand Ruslan I worked with a little bit before. Anna I didn't know at all. So again, there's just those variables of I know them to be great dancers. I know them to be professionals, but what's the chemistry with us going to be? So it's just it's like the first day of school. Like you can be prepared, but you still have to take those leaps and introduce yourself to new people and get to know each other, and you never know, something weird might happen, something awkward might happen, hopefully not, and it's nerves, it's also excitement of just a new situation.
So then this is what you're feeling coming into it.
Yeah.
And with that, can you tell us how your time with Ruslan and Lisa in constructing your duet, or shall we say going into your test mode based upon what you had prepared, how did that play out?
Ultimately, it played out very well. I was very pleased by the end of rehearsal. I thought both dancers worked very well with me. They, of course, worked very well together. They've danced together for a while now, and have done a lot of partnering and pieces together. Again, talking about those initial moments getting started, again, there was this tricky moment within me where applying all my ideas suddenly felt weird. And how can I explain that? I guess I walked in with my plan, and then I had the dancers in front of me, and I went, oh, right, and what tools do I use? What mechanism do I put into play to start testing out these ideas? And all of a sudden I was like, wait, I don't know, do I come up with a phrase and teach it to them? Do I start trying to sculpt some shapes on them? Like, how do I get started? And that was also a moment where I went, okay, just trust what you do. You don't have to reinvent the wheel in terms of what processes you put into place. So just do what you do. So I put them where I wanted them in space, and I just started talking through the actions and blocking it out, kind of like moving them like chess pieces on the stage, and then started to add more material to that, more gesture, more movement, to enhance what they were doing, and it all just then started to roll from there.
Oh, that's great.
But it was almost like, I need to walk, but how do I lift my leg? How do I put my foot down? Okay.
And this is after choreographing.
And this
how
is,
many years?
I've been doing this for, I don't
And still.
know, since,
Right.
1996. So it's been an era or two that I've been doing this.
But still,
It doesn't matter.
with a veteran.
Doesn't matter.
Right.
Yeah.
And it, from what you described, you were very pleased with what you were able to accomplish in terms of having created 2 minutes of the 7.5-minute duet on day one, which was terrific. And I know that you mentioned that you spent the last hour devoting the time to the Verdenfire Quartet.
Yes.
With Ruslan, Lisa, and Anna.
Yes.
And
3 of the 4 dancers. Yeah.
3 of the 4. Yeah. And that during the week, Jon sent a video of the duet to Ruslan and Lisa to help them take that preparatory time so that they can come into the July 8th rehearsal ready to hit the ground running. Which brings us to the July 8th rehearsal.
Okay, great.
And Jon began by teaching a solo portion of that duet to both Ruslan and Lisa. And as you explained it, that Lisa would be dancing it later in the duet. So they both needed to learn.
Yeah, he dances it early in the duet, and then she repeats the material and does it again later. Yeah.
Does it later. And you said also you wanted Anna to learn it as well, to get an even better sense of the piece from a stylistic standpoint.
Right.
Then Ruslan, Lisa, and Jon went into a review of the duet so far, and you all were able to identify the places where the choreography was a little bit fuzzy or they didn't remember, and you were able to clarify all of those different areas that were not quite clear to them. And then came the creation.
And things that I wanted to fix.
Oh,
too. Yeah.
There you go. And then Jon moved into the creation part, where you wound up, you told me, creating 1.5 minutes of new material, having hoped to do a little bit more, but you acknowledged that the choreography was actually quite complex and took a long time to learn. So maybe that 1.5 minutes was going to be the most that was really possible under the circumstances. So would you take us through the process of creating that 1.5 minutes of material? And there's some
I can
cheat sheet notes
I can
for
try.
you.
Yes, yes, and I have some notes here
usual.
about that. Um, well, it was very much again about coming in prepared. Um, I sort of analyzed where we had left off from after the first 2 minutes of the piece, and after the first rehearsal, and I knew from where we left off that I wanted to create a transition to get us into the next sort of big chunk of the dance, where the two dancers are actually tied together by a scarf. Yeah, we haven't mentioned this scarf in this video cast, but there's a long scarf involved in this dance, which is a metaphor. It's also hopefully a beautiful prop, a beautiful something aesthetic to look at, but it is getting manipulated by the dancers, and they're manipulating each other with it, and at this point in the dance they actually are tied together. That's something I've never done before, so here we are saying you should really come in prepared and don't have too many crazy ideas to flesh out, but you also have to push yourself and try new things, otherwise, well, we won't go into that, but you have to. So I was like, well, we're just going to do this, and so I did create the transition that I want, that is beautiful in movement, but also sticks with the story. And then they are there tied together, and we just had to start playing with, so what can you do tied together in this way? I of course had some ideas to try, but you never know until you have two bodies doing it. And it wound up being a lot of fun because again, because I had set up the metaphor in the way I wanted to, and I knew we were in the right area of the music, I sort of was then free to sort of create whatever needed to come out movement-wise, and we could really play and play. We had to, because they were, there are moments where one tried to go one way, but they're tied together and they're jerking each other around, and until they figure out exactly how they can flow together. And there was a lot of falling down and flopping over and tripping each other, and we were laughing, just laughing so much with each other, and it was really a fun way to spend an afternoon.
Boy, that sounds great. And then you ran into the technical difficulty.
Yes. Then
with the scarf.
So there's points in the entire dance so far where the scarf does get tied around one person, and then it gets untied and put on the other person, and then it gets tied around both of them together. And now, with them then dancing tied together, eventually that scarf is getting pulled tighter and tighter, the knot is getting tighter and tighter. So we reached a point in the dance where I was like, okay, great, now I want one of you to untie it, and they could not do it. It took like minutes. I was like, well, we can't stop the dance. Say, excuse me, I'm just gonna untie this. So we were kind of at the end of our time anyway, so I said, let's stop here. Let's review what we have, and I'm going to have to go home and think of a solution for how we're going to get this thing untied again after this section. We thought, oh, maybe there's a way to jerry-rig it so it doesn't have to actually be tied, and I was like, that doesn't sound right to me. I think I just have to come up with a way to do it so we don't even have to untie it. Maybe it'll still be in a loop, and you can then tug of war with each other that way or something. So I had to go, I think I know how I'm going to do it, but that will remain to be seen.
Interesting. And that really brings up a bigger picture point, I think, about props, because it seems like this is a great example of the challenges that can arise when one is trying to incorporate a prop into a dance piece. So what would be some of the reasons you would choose to use a prop, and once you make that decision, how does the use of that prop affect the way you rehearse?
Mm-hmm. Well, why use a prop? I mean, I think that's quite simply just an artistic choice. Um, you could be inspired to use a prop for many reasons. It might just be a beautiful prop that you want to play around with and see what it can do. Maybe there's a specific sort of theatrical element the prop adds. Maybe there's a story you can tell with the prop. There's props are full of metaphors if you let them be. I'm very much of the school of thought. I know there's yeah, I think most people who have studied their art and been with their art for a while will tell you if you're going to incorporate something, you need to use it thoroughly. You need to use it well throughout the piece. It's silly to bring on a prop for just a moment and then throw it away. Obviously in the world of plays and theater that can be different, but even still, if something's truly important, you want to introduce it in the beginning, have it come back again in the middle, and perhaps do something very interesting and or important at the end. This prop that I'm dealing with is on stage the whole time, and as I explained earlier in weeks prior, that it starts off at the top of the dance is wrapped around Lisa, and it's like a cocoon, and she slowly peels it off of her and becomes free of it. In this duet, it's very much what they are talking about, if you can think of it that way. They're very much relating to each other with respect to this prop and what it means to them. So she's trying to still continue to drop it and get rid of it. He keeps saying, but don't you want it? It's so beautiful. It's so lovely. It looks lovely on you. And she's like, oh, well, maybe you're right. Maybe I don't have to get rid of it, but I don't know. It's still confining, So there's a lot that I want to say with this prop. And I think there's a lot that we can say with the prop that maybe we couldn't without it. Certainly you can gesture, oh, I'm confined. But if you really want to explore that, why not have the prop and wrap it, truly confine the person, and then explore, well, how are they going to move and get themselves out? What are they going to do with this once they're free of it? And so that's what we're exploring in this dance.
And do you find that the fact that you are incorporating it into your piece requires perhaps a different type of approach to the way you rehearse with Lisa and Ruslan as a result?
Yes. I mean, I think all of the hallmarks are there of, again, trying to be innovative, trying to be curious about what we're doing. But we have a physical thing we have to manipulate. So it's not just about how their bodies move or how they partner with each other. There then becomes a whole technique that we have to develop about how we manipulate this prop. It doesn't work if you grab it 3/4 of the way towards the end. You have to grab it all the way at the end. Things like that suddenly become very important and need to be rehearsed. How are you going to tie the knot so that the next person knows how to untie it? It can't just be any old way. It needs to be done specifically. It also needs to be done in time with the music. So if we need to tie this knot very quickly, what's the technique we're going to use for that? And then both dancers have to practice that and become proficient in that. So it becomes a whole other element that has to be explored and rehearsed.
So it really adds additional layers of complexity on many levels, not only in terms of the narrative and the ideas that you want to convey in the piece itself, but in the rehearsal process, how are you going to utilize it to work in all the ways you say and to effectively communicate what it is you wish to say. So you've really bitten off quite a bit here. And interestingly, I'm thinking back to the second challenge we talked about of having only 3 rehearsals to get this done. And here now, you've introduced a prop, so you've really challenged yourself because there's just not a lot of time to really tackle those additional layers of complexity, but tackle it you are. So.
And you asked me why I was nervous.
Now, we knew we'd get to the bottom of that. Well, the next and final ABB rehearsal is scheduled for July 15th with Ruslan and Lisa. So be sure to tune into our next videocast to find out what narrative and choreographic choices Jon makes to complete the duet and how he's able to get a duet and a quartet ready in time for the August 16th performance, when this is the last time you are going to be there. Who knows what's going to happen? So definitely come back and watch our next video cast to find out. And thank you today for joining us, and we look forward to seeing how the process continues.